Yo, what's checking, everybody? We're back. It's another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Jason Suchomel, Anwar, Richardson. Do us a solid, hit that like button, click the bell, ring the bell, do all of the things with the bell that help the channel. We're 2 days away from the start of the Texas football season, gentlemen. And does it feel like that yet? Do you guys feel like you're in the middle? Anwar, do you feel like it's game week, truly game week? Has it sunk in for you yet?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was watching UAB playing someone last night just because it was like football and I was just throwing a game on. So absolutely, we've had this stuff with Sark this week, had some players talk this week, watched Louisiana. I listened to their head coach, Billy Napier, on a radio show out there, listened to him for like 20 minutes, Jason. I was like, what is this guy's name again? Jason. I read Jason's breakdown.
Not this Jason, I hope. Wait,
yeah, I was like, man. I was like, what the hell? But I read Jason's breakdown and analysis and on the matchups this morning on Orangebloods. And yeah, it feels like a game week to me.
What made for you? Was it the Monday press availability? What's the thing that it starts to become game week for you? Yeah,
it's the Monday, really started talking about that type of thing and the opponents and everything else and everything I feel like, I always tell you guys I hate the off season because there's just so many stories and so many narratives and it may or may not end up being true. But I feel like game week is when everything really counts and everything that everyone says really matters. I feel like the off season is just taking a lot of mental notes, but everything this person says from Monday on really is applicable to what happens on Saturday. So hearing Sark, kind of just outline it, this week, the plans for Casey and Hudson and just talking about the team in Louisiana, I think that's what did it for me.
Jason, what's the top story for you going into this game? Because it feels like this is going to be a game that the nation pays attention towards. It's not the only matchup of ranked teams, but, it's one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 games on the schedule. For you going in, is it all about the quarterbacks? Like, what is it ultimately that's got your fancy?
Yeah, it's the quarterbacks. I mean, listen, it's not the sexiest game on the schedule this week because Louisiana's not a big marquee name, but 2 top 25 teams, new coaching staff for Texas. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the quarterbacks and the overall play of the offense. Let's see how Bijan does against what should be a pretty solid Louisiana defense and defensive front. Let's see how Hudson Card does in his first career start. Let's see how Sark does his first time managing an offense in Austin. Anwar said I broke down the matchups yesterday, so I was reading all about Louisiana on their depth charts and their official website, just write-ups about their players. And this, so they kind of started to click for me yesterday. Like, holy crap, man! It feels like it's been longer than one season. Feels maybe it was a COVID thing, but it feels like it's been a long off season, man. But yeah, that really started to click with me yesterday. And this is a game, man. I think Texas fans should be very intrigued. I mean, as I'm doing these matchups, I kind of wrote that. I said, man, I don't know. These matchups for game one are always kind of a crapshoot. Okay, you just don't know. But certainly a year when you've got a new head coach, new offensive scheme, new defensive scheme, new quarterback, some holes to fill on defense for the Longhorns. I mean, it's tough even doing these matchups because I don't know what to expect from Hudson Card and this Texas offense tomorrow. He may go out and throw, or on Saturday rather, he may go out and throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. He may struggle and Casey Thompson may come in and replace him and catch lightning in a bottle with Casey Thompson, as we saw in the bowl game. So a lot of unknowns, a lot of mystery into this game. But yeah, it really started to kind of kick in for me yesterday that, holy crap, it's game week and it's going to be here before we know it. And there's a lot of intrigue in this game. So I'm excited to see how it unfolds on Saturday.
Anwar, is there anything, is there an answer other than quarterback when I talk about, the big overall narrative of what we're watching going into this game?
I think Jason touched on it. I think it's Sarkisian. I think this is a big thing for me. It's, him being back, in the saddle, him being a head coach again. Hasn't been a head coach in a few years. What has he learned from Nick Saban, and is he able to apply that? Again, I go into it. with a lot of Texas fans have high hopes. It's funny. Like I said, I read Jason's breakdown, and people acting like
beat up on it already. I'm getting beat up already.
He's getting killed. I mean, he's getting killed for even suggesting that Louisiana could be good in any area. And people are throwing out like 41-17 predictions, and it's not going to be close and everything like that. And just the fascinating thing is, Sark has never won more than 8 regular season games. So for me, it's about, all right, is this the new and improved coaching version of Sarkisian? Is this the person that went, to the mountaintop and learned from Nick Saban, is coming down with all this information and all this knowledge, the game planning they're supposed to do, the in-game adjustments, what he's able to do here at Texas? To me, this is a lot. The quarterback is one thing, but this is really about the Sark era. And then one thing, Ketch, that we know, we saw the last time, we saw everybody have a whole lot of high hopes with Tom Herman. We saw everybody have a whole lot of high hopes because, man, he was under Urban Meyer. Look at the success they had in Houston. They beat Baker Mayfield. They beat Lamar Jackson, and he's coming in. He's Mensa. It's like all these things that you heard, and then Maryland happened, and everything kind of changed and switched. So it's a big game. I mean, because the one thing you can't do is lose this and then go into Arkansas next week with with the whole fan base on pins and needles. So for me, this is a big game for Sark.
Yeah, I think both of you guys make a really interesting and good point in that it's hard to, when we do our predictions tomorrow, all we really know of this team for the most part is what our memories from a year ago are, right? So when we think of all the players on offense and defense, and some of that's good, right? We remember the end of Bijan Robinson, and so we can close our eyes and see him having success. But the rest of the team, we can only really see it through what it looked like through Tom Herman. So it will be interesting on Saturday to see what this group of players looks like. What does Texas football under Steve Sarkisian look like? And doesn't it feel like if they get this game right, that it's, okay, that's a really good sign. Early season game against a difficult opponent, no excuses to get it done. Anwar, you tell me, because we're going to have predictions and we're going to talk about a lot of things throughout the course of the day, but this isn't a game where Texas is shooting from the layup line. And I feel like I don't want to make any one game snap judgments either way, but it does feel like if they lose, that it'll cast a little bit of doubt as to just how much improvement have they made from Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian if this isn't a game that Sarkisian's going to win.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching the Serenity did an interview with Xavier Worthy and Ketch. I didn't realize that he hadn't played in 2 years.
Yeah.
Until he said it, and I was like, oh, snap. But you're starting right now against Louisiana as a guy who hasn't played football in like 2 years. Like when you're talking about having to envision something as opposed to knowing like for sure what that is. And again, Jordan Whittington, we've got to envision, what he can do. We've seen glimpses for Joshua Moore, what he can do. We still, to a certain degree, have to envision what Hudson Card can do.
Absolutely.
As a starter. I mean, there's no knock on Hudson, but we still have to envision like everything that we've heard about him in practice, that's automatically going to translate, into a game. We've got to envision that this defense is going to be much improved, which was the 7th ranked defense last year. What does that look like now? So there's a little bit of guesswork. There's a little bit of extending a measure of faith as of this moment with Sark and everything to that effect. But yes, a loss definitely is, you don't want those problems. You don't want that smoke at all. But yeah, it is right now. You're telling yourself you believe it because let's be honest, Texas is better than Louisiana on paper. Like they just are. They're a better team on paper. What we just got to see is from an individual standpoint, what we just got to see is Texas as a team, can they utilize all the talent they have to be the team that they realistically should?
I think a loss on where I'll go a step further. I think it's catastrophic. If Texas loses game one, Tom Herman was able to manage that a little bit when he lost his very first game against Maryland. They're able to kind of battle back and everybody threw their hands up like, whoa, what is going on? I don't think Sark gets that kind of leash and that kind of benefit of the doubt, and I'll explain why. people are also looking at what's going on in College Station in Norman, Oklahoma. And if he comes in and loses his first game, people already now have doubts. I mean, recruits right now have doubts about Texas, and we've talked about it, and I've written about it. Recruits aren't giving Texas the benefit of the doubt anymore. They're like, hey, we did that with Tom Herman, and they got burned. Recruits did. They did it with Charlie Strong. They got burned. They want to see the proof in the pudding with Sark. So if they lose to Louisiana on Saturday, which isn't out of the question, man, it's like an 8-point spread. These fans are acting like it's 30-point spread. I said, hey, if you're that confident, I said on our board, I said, you should be betting your house on this thing. You think Texas is going to win by 30 points? I mean, it's an 8-point spread for a reason.
Is it down from 8.5, Jason?
It might be 8.5.
Okay.
It's around. I said it's a little above a touchdown, I think is what.
Okay. Look.
Pointed. But if they lose this game, again, I think it's catastrophic because A&M's that gap between Texas and Texas A&M in a recruiting perspective and the trajectories of the program, it just gets a little bit wider. And then, like you said, you have to go up to a difficult Arkansas place, and you'd have a cloud above you and just casting doubt around the entire program. So this is a really, really, I mean, it's an interesting game because there's so many unknown dynamics, but this is a big, big game for the Texas program, for Sark overall. I mean, I hate to say a must-win game in Sark's first game. That sounds ridiculous, but it almost is, man. They cannot have any momentum that they've built up come crashing down after week one. They just can't do it. And I'm telling you, man, I'm going to pick Texas to win. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be there's going to be some back and forth punches in this game before Texas ultimately comes out on top. But any Texas fan, and I'm not saying Texas can't come out and win this game 43-17. It could happen, but it's not a gimme. And this is, if they somehow stumble the way we've seen, coaches do in the past, saw Tom Herman do it in his first game. I mean, that's a catastrophic loss for the trajectory of this program to me.
It's interesting when there's some components of Louisiana that I don't feel like, it feels like the Texas football team Louisiana has their respect, right?
I think you're right. Yes.
I think they get it. It's interesting because sometimes you'll hear guys talk about the opposing team and it can sound like I got to say something nice about the opponent and they're going to be great. And even in conference play, right? I mean, sometimes it feels like guys have to fake it a little bit in terms of they just played Oklahoma and now it's Kansas State. It's not the same thing. Louisiana seems to have Texas's attention, which I think's a really good thing. Anwar, this is a team with 20 returning starters, a quarterback that will be making his 29th career start, and he's got a 24-4 record overall. And I think the thing that stands out to me the most about them is how many close games they played last year. I think either 7 or 8 of their games was decided by a touchdown or less, and they won all but one of them. The only game they lost was to Coastal Carolina, who was a pretty good team a year ago. So this is a veteran team with a veteran quarterback that knows how to win close games. They're very well coached. It is hard. And I don't think Texas has the talent advantage that Texas fans think, because there's a marginal amount of advantage that Texas has in recruiting, right? I mean, I am a firm believer that anything that's a regular 4-star on down is kind of the same as a 3-star. It just has a shiny label on it. But Louisiana's developed their players. This isn't incoming freshman talent where you go, oh my God, look how Texas is doing compared to them. This is about developed talent 4 or 5 years into a lot of these guys' careers. And the narratives change. Things don't stay the same forever. This is a very mature team that Texas is playing. And I think it's going to, and I'm going to pick Texas to win the game, but I think it's going to take a very mature performance to come out and handle your business against a team that ticks a lot of boxes.
Well, yeah, and the quarterback that you're talking about, Levi Lewis, he's appeared in 43 games in his career. So that's nothing to, shake a stick at as a fifth-year guy. I mean, so I mean, he's not.
Hudson Card has like 4 snaps.
Correct. It is not this. We're not saying that, oh, this means he's a future NFL player, but there's something to be said for, college experience. Now, the thing is, are they playing against elite competition? No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, in the Iowa State game that happened last year, you could say maybe they caught Iowa State sleeping or whatever the case may be, because Iowa State rebounded and ended up having a pretty good
year. That may be
year.
the best thing that happened to Texas is them having gone up to Ames and won that game, honestly.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least gets their attention, right? But to your point, it's a veteran squad going against a Texas team that just has a lot of moving parts. It's the thing I keep saying, it's a lot of moving parts for Texas. It's a new offense, it's a new defense, it's a new quarterback, new components on the offensive line, receivers that still have to prove themselves a little bit. Bijan Robinson, I mean, we know what he can do, but they've still got to have some sort of flow that's going to happen on offense. So, and new coaches, and how do these guys react to getting punched in the mouth? What happens if things don't work automatically? All those kind of little things. The thing that Louisiana has and what they're able to do that Texas can't do is Louisiana could just go out and play ball because they know their system, they know each other, they know everything. So it's an easy thing for them to do. Texas has got to figure it out, and they got to figure it out on the fly against a tough team. So, you asked me the other week, am I wavering a little bit? And I said, no. I'm wavering a little bit more now as we get closer on my prediction. I'll probably stay with Louisiana just to be consistent. But that being said, I still think I don't think it's the blowout that Texas fans think it's going to be. And I think it's one of those games that if Texas ends up winning by 7, by 10, whatever the case may be, you take that and you run with it.
So I'm looking at, I guess maybe these were, these are a couple of predictions from The Athletic, okay? And I'm not asking for a game prediction, but I want you guys to hear the score, because then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. So Stuart Mandel is picking Louisiana to beat Texas 23-21. Bruce Feldman is picking Texas to win 20-14. My question, and I already had this in my head, but those scores made me really want to ask this, and let's chew on it a little bit. How many points is it going to take to win this game?
I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I said this yesterday. I'm going to pick Texas to win, but I don't think it's going to be a back-and-forth shootout. I think the Texas defense is going to be pretty good. I think this Texas offense is going to take some time to kind of get its feet under it. So I think 30 gets it done for sure. I've in my head bounce around. I'm thinking 27-ish is about where I think Texas will be, and I think they get the win. So I think 27-30 probably gets the job done for Texas. But man, it's just, again, man, we're kind of flying blind with Hudson Card making his first start. And I mean, you guys mentioned it. Experience at the quarterback position is a great equalizer for a team that's overmatched on paper in terms of talent. You have a 5th-year quarterback that's going for his 25th win versus a guy making his first start. That's going to balance out a lot of things for an underdog team that has the benefit of the experienced quarterback. So, I don't think Louisiana is going to march up and down the field, even with that experience at quarterback, with that experience at receiver, with their experience returning all 5 offensive linemen. I still think Texas is going to keep them in check. I don't think you're going to need 40 points that we've talked about before in games previously. I think probably if Texas can get to 30, I'd feel really comfortable about Texas getting the win.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't disagree with Jason. I mean, I can't talk myself into 40 points or anything crazy like that. That's asking a lot for a new offense. But, when you've got, Hudson Card who's playing that, I anticipate him to play, like a guy who played with his first start. I anticipate there's probably going to be a couple of mistakes. Anticipate, a turnover or 2. Like, you just got to expect like certain things going to happen. But at the end of the day, I don't think that being said, Louisiana comes in here and they just light up the sky. Like, I don't see that happening. I think it's got to be a game where Louisiana's got to hope for some turnovers and hoping that a turnover that maybe they can convert into a touchdown helps to keep them around and keep them in the game. But yeah, I'm with Jason. You get to that 27 and 28 mark. That's probably how this game gets determined. I would say so. By the way, Ketch, the person who predicted Louisiana, did he give any explanation as to why, or is it just a score prediction?
I just saw this on Orangeblood. Somebody had
Okay.
copied and pasted the scores
Okay.
of the game to both Feldman and Mandel.
Okay.
It's weird because I thought this game in my head plays higher scoring than both of you do. But I'm listening to both of you talk, and you both make a lot of sense. It just seems like opening games at Texas tend to have lots of points in them. Maybe I'm Hermanized and Charlie Strong-eyed, right? Like we saw shootouts with Notre Dame, or we saw Notre Dame just drop kick Texas upside the head, and we've seen Maryland. So maybe I've just had memories of games that almost get out of control. If it goes into the 30s, how comfortable are we that Texas offensively is capable of that? In the first game of I think we get to October, I don't think this is a question that we're asking. Hey, is Texas capable of scoring 35 points, let's say? But in a game one, I mean, it is a first career start, and it feels like the thing you should do in that situation is lean on your defense to carry the weight so that your quarterback who's making his first career start doesn't have to perform at a level like that. I just don't know that, with all due respect to Pete Kwiatkowski, if we're there yet. I don't know.
You're going to rely on their defense and their running game, which is going to obviously keep the clock moving. I mean, can they get in the 30s? Of course. I mean, you have a turnover here, special teams play here. I mean, hey, listen, Louisiana's special teams is not too bad itself. They're, in reading up yesterday, their kick returner had 2 touchdown returns last year. Their kicker came in midseason, didn't miss a kick. So, yeah, I mean, certainly they can get in the 30s. But again, I'll say it again, we're flying blind with this offense. I mean, we don't know what to expect from Hudson Card. I think we know Bijan's going to be Bijan, and he's going to run the ball effectively, and Roshan. So, but by running the ball, that'll control the clock a little bit. And I don't know. I just don't see this game as being a shootout, a 38-35 type.
That would surprise you.
It would surprise me. But again, who the hell knows? I mean, more than any other, I said this more than any other matchups. I remember trying to break down the matchups and, okay, this might happen. I was like, man, I don't know what the hell to expect from this one, if I'm being completely honest. But I would expect Texas to try to lean on their run game, lean on their defense. And Louisiana ran the ball predominantly, was a run team last year as well. They've got their linemen coming back. It's going to be a new starting running back, but he's a running back with some experience. So this could be a game by Big 12 standards that moves pretty quickly in terms of clock movement and shortens the game a little bit. So it would surprise me to see it go in the 30s, but hey man, if Hudson Card comes out and does the things that people inside the program think he's capable of, and he's slinging it around and, throwing for 320 yards and plays the kind of game, that, like I said, that people think that he is that type of player, hey, all bets are off. But I don't even know what the over and under is on this one, but whatever it is, I'd probably be inclined to take the under.
Catch, if this game gets into the 30s, I think Texas is whipping that ass. Like I think Texas has opened a can of whoop ass. I don't see Louisiana being able to drop that kind of arsenal here against UT. And I don't think that, for as good as Levi Lewis may be, he ain't getting into, a head-to-head with Hudson Card. Like that I won't believe, right? So I think if if it's a low-scoring game and they can kind of do some ball control and play on defense, then Louisiana has a shot. But if Texas has been able to open this thing wide open, I think we're talking about an ass whooping that's happening in DKR. And look, I talked to somebody that I'm going to have something in the war room. I talked to someone, recently, and they said, look, that Sarkisian may have a quiet confidence that he's not giving away, not telling you guys, because he said, look, at the end of the day, if he's promising that Casey Thompson is going to play in this game, the odds are probably good that he's scouted this team enough to know that they're better than Louisiana. Like, if he's going to give Casey Thompson any kind of significant reps, then that means they know that they're a better team and they can mess around and do those type of things. So if we're in the 30s, Catch, I would definitely say that Texas probably open a can of whoop ass. Watch it be 48-45, something crazy like that. And this thing gets replayed, but I would be shocked. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd be shocked.
Well, we wouldn't have guessed that Maryland would have played into the 40s once upon a time.
No.
Wait, who is that quarterback? And then it was, who's their backup quarterback? Like it didn't matter. I want to get to the quarterbacks, but I do want to talk about the defense for a little bit, right? As much as we talked about the quarterbacks all offseason long with the defense, are we sure that this is the kind of defense that can hold somebody under 20 points?
No.
Okay.
20? No. I think it'll be a good defense when you look at the entirety of it. I like the depth at defensive line, and I'm getting crap on I actually gave Louisiana a 1-star advantage. So basically a push with their offensive line versus the Texas defensive line. I said, hey, I know what we've heard about this Texas defensive line in fall camp. I know the names. I know there's talent. There's a lot of depth. To me, that's the biggest part of the Texas defensive line. They're going to be able to send strength in numbers at Louisiana, but there's not, in my opinion, a dominant player on this defensive line. Not yet. And people said, oh, what about Alfred Collins and Keandre Coburn? I said, Coburn had 1 sack last year as honorable mention all Big 12. I said, I need to see this defensive line dominate in a game before I'm ready to fully buy in. I think it's going to be a good defensive line, but a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how it's maybe the best defensive line this program's seen in 15 years. Well, how much of that was a product of it beating up on the Texas offensive line in that first scrimmage? I don't know. The linebackers, again, you bring some experience in there via transfers. I don't know that there's elite playmakers at the linebacker position. I need to see it. I think the secondary is going to be pretty good. I love the corners. I think there's talent in the secondary. But do I think am I ready to go on the record and say this is going to be a dominant Texas defense week in and week out, the type that's going to hold teams to, low 20s every week? No, I'm not there yet. I think it's certainly possible. I really like Kwiatkowski. I'm kind of intrigued by the variety of schemes he's going to do and how he mixes things up and is going to keep you guessing. So I kind of give him the benefit of the doubt the same way I do Sark on offense. I really like Kwiatkowski schematically on defense. But I need to see some of this talent that we know is on the roster. We know that Texas recruited high-end talent. It's kind of like the opposite of what you were saying again about Louisiana, Ketch. It hasn't fully, I don't want to say it hasn't been developed, but those guys haven't been dominant college football players yet, not up front. So I need to see that. I need to see Coburn and Collins and Sweat and those guys just dominating a pretty good Louisiana offensive line. If they do that on Saturday, I'll totally reassess for my matchup breakdowns for next week. But I need to see it with my own 2 eyes before I'm ready to say, yeah, this is going to be a dominant defense, a dominant offensive line. Or defense. I don't know
if they'll be dominant, but they should be good. I mean, when you look at it, the majority of starters on there are upperclassmen. I think the majority, I'm looking at the depth chart, the majority of starters are seniors, as I kind of go through here. Can't realize how old we were getting, but I mean, it's crazy to think that DeMarvion Overshown is actually a senior. BJ Foster is actually a senior. And, you look at, Coburn, Jameson, these, first of all, those guys that I just named are, Ketch, would you say potential draft picks?
Yeah.
All those guys, Foster, Coburn, Jameson, DeMarvion Overshown. So you're talking about 4 guys.
I wouldn't say Foster, not yet, but everybody else, yeah.
But I think they're draft picks, but they still have things to prove. I mean, Keandre, listen, we all love him. He had 1 sack last year, man. He's got to be better this year. I mean, he'll get drafted just because he's got the tools, but his production can be better. And that pretty much goes for every guy across the board there, aside from maybe Jameson.
Sure. But when you put together a group of upperclassmen who have played and had a lot of playing time, to your point, I ain't standing on a table and saying like this defense is going to be a top 2 or anything like that, but they should be better in theory when you've had this kind of playing experience. Now, Jason, to your point, it's also a new system. So there are some other things and there's other guys who are being thrown in here that they've got to learn how to work with, like your Ray Thorntons and your Ovia Gofus, and they've got to be able to, sort those things out. But there's enough talent in here where you feel like there's enough NFL talent on this roster or potential NFL talent, whether drafted or at least undrafted free agents, with a bunch of upperclassmen. So I just think in theory, they should be better. And in theory, they should smack Louisiana around, to be honest with you.
It's a problem, though, is that this is a program that's been talked about in theory for such a long time that it does, even when you believe the words, right? Like I listened to both of you and I'm like, no, all of that makes complete sense. It's hard to see this Texas football team. That's the thing. I want to, when we do the post-game show on Saturday, Anwar, and you're done doing the post-game with Sark and you come back, like, I want one of the first things that both of us will be able to do is look at each other and go, okay, now we know what Sarkisian ball looks like, and it feels and looks and comes across in a different way than the previous regimes that we've seen. Because when we watched Herman's first game, we came away from that saying to ourselves, that wasn't a whole lot better than Charlie. Like, it maybe not have been as bad, right? There may have been things that you could have taken, some moral victories, if you will. But Texas hired Sarkisian to be elite. They hired Sarkisian because they believed that Herman was, while very good, not the guy to go from very good to that next level. So weirdly, I don't want to compare Sark to Herman. I want to be able to watch Sark ball with this coaching staff and just go, okay, we have not seen that before. That may not mean they're going to go undefeated, but at least there's a way of viewing Texas football that's different than the way that we've interpreted it in the past. And I'm kind of 50-50 on whether we get that. I don't know. It's what I think I'd like to see, but maybe that's not the way life works. And we don't know that Sark is absolutely better than Herman. We just don't. So I'm fascinated by just the whole theater of it all.
And Ketch, to your point, and to add in and tie in something that Jason said, the one reason why Texas fans, as ticked off as they were with that Maryland game, the first one, and they were throwing with the programs, they would throw those. Remember, they were throwing them out on the stadium and stuff. Like, they were pissed off about that. The only reason they were able to recover a little bit, because they said, well, he did inherit a really bad team.
Yeah.
At some point, you were able to make the excuse for him and say, well, 5-7. They did have that really bad loss. All right. Okay, this is a building year. We totally understand. And then the Sugar Bowl happens, and you can feel a little bit better about that. But see, what you guys are saying is Sarkisian doesn't inherit a bad team. So he inherits a good team, not a great team, but he inherits a good team where you coming off of it and saying, okay, 7-3, shorted into a couple of things, but you got Bijan, you got Hudson, you got all these other good guys that are there. You got some transfers in, and I think the expectations become like, all right, yeah, now, okay, you're not going to be like Tom, right? No, you're going to be taking us to 10 wins. I mean, when we all did our predictions, and I mean, how many people scoffed at us? It's because we may have been below 10. So
everybody, well, not everybody,
pretty much, right? So I'm with you on that. That's where, to your point, I'm just agreeing with you, Ketch. Everyone's going to look at it and say they don't want it to be even. You were hired to be great.
Let's talk about the quarterbacks for a little bit. We've amazingly buried the lead because it is a lot on Saturday going to be about the quarterbacks. Jason, I'll start with you. Expectations, like, how does this thing go down for Card in the opener in your mind?
I think he will be solid. I'm not expecting spectacular. It's his first start. I mean, there are going to be some mistakes, some missteps, probably some misreads, some nerves. We have such a small sample size from Hudson Card at this level that it's hard to even say, oh, like when I've seen him play, he seems to do this or this. You can't even really go off of that. But he's without Troy O'Mary. He's not going to be out there. He's playing against an experienced defense, an experienced secondary, which not elite by any means, but it's an experienced defense that is not going to make mistakes. And they're probably not going to let guys run free on busted coverages. And I mean, Hudson's going to have to work. He's going to have to make good reads. He's going to have to make accurate throws. He's probably going to have to make relatively quick decisions, depending on what kind of protection the offensive line gives him, of course. But I think he'll be good, just because I'm a Hudson Card fan, kind of like you, Ketch. I've always been a fan of his since I was covering him as a recruit. And I go back to the things I've talked to his quarterback coach and the things he's told me about Hudson's arm talent. I go back to things I've been told by people inside the Texas program about what kind of practice player he was even last year. One person said, hey, last year he was probably the best quarterback they had on their roster in practice. That's certainly not a knock on Sam. That was just praise for Hudson Card. So is he going to be able to carry all that over onto the field in game one, his first career start? I don't know. I don't know. I think there's going to be some growing pains, just like there is with any true freshman quarterback. Or a freshman quarterback. There was when Sam started. I think Hudson will be good, and I think we'll be able to come out of this game saying, man, we saw some things out of Hudson Card. You can see what all these people are talking about behind the scenes about his potential, but I don't expect he's going to come out of this game with 70% completion and 320 yards and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions. I'm trying to be realistic. I think there are going to be some moments where he's going to struggle. The offense might struggle. The passing game might struggle. About what you'd expect from a freshman quarterback making his first start. But I do think there's enough talent there that he'll come out playing well enough where you'll be able to feel optimistic if you're a Texas fan about the future. But then we talk about Hudson. Hey, what happens if Casey Thompson comes in and plays really well? I mean, when he gets put into the game. So just so many unknowns. Sarkis said Thompson's going to play. You can't go into this game with a plan, in my opinion. Hey, we're going to give Casey the third series. Well, what if Hudson leads Texas to 2 touchdown drives? What if Hudson comes out and 2 of his first 3 passes are intercepted? Then you got to make a change right off the bat. So, I'm really interested to see how it's going to unfold. But I do expect Hudson will play well enough where he'll still secure that starting job. I don't think we're going to be talking about him as a world beater after game 1, but I think he'll play well enough that Texas gets the win. He maintains his spot atop the depth chart.
See, Jason, you always say how I steal your thoughts, and I thought you were done with your thought, and then you stole my thought at the end, and I couldn't do it because, Ketch, my thought is I don't know, and let me just be on the record to say I don't love this whole Casey Thompson is going to play versus Louisiana thing. And I'm a guy who did stand on the table the entire offseason for Casey Thompson as a guy that I thought he could have the chance of winning the job. But I just don't love this whole scenario. I don't love when are you going to throw him in here? And, people have said, Ketch, they've said, oh, well, that's just coach speak, right? He says that, but that's just coach speak. But you guys know coach speak to the fans translates as a lie to a player. And, we may look, oh, it's just coach speak. It's just coach speak. A player interprets that as you were deceiving to me. So he's expecting to get into the game, and it's not just going to be some sort of mop-up duty. So with that being said, when do you put him in? And for how long do you put him in? And when do you make that decision? And to Jason's point, what if he does well? What if all of a sudden it starts looking like the Alamo Bowl again? And all of a sudden it just bombs away. What happens in that scenario? And then what do you do with your young quarterback? What do you do with your veteran quarterback? I don't like that whole situation going in. Now, if at the end of the day, Texas just blows them out and it is what it is, maybe it means nothing. At the end of the day, maybe Casey comes in, he's productive, but Hudson finishes a game. Okay, but I just going to say, like, on the record, I just don't love it. And because of how that scenario, we don't really know how it's going to go. I can't tell you, Ketch, with all honesty and certainty that I know how Hudson Card is going to perform.
I mean, I think if there's anything that would excite, I think, again, I listen to both of you and I come away kind of just nodding my head. Yes, you guys, I think are striking a lot of the right notes in terms of expectations, in terms of storylines. I think if you want to be, I think the most optimistic Texas fan would say, let's take the quarterbacks out of the equation for a second. Because this is something I wrote about in my 10 thoughts from the weekend. And I do think it's true when you look at Bijan Robinson, and really you can include the entire running back group. I think we all agree that's a strong 4 guys, right? I mean, at the very least, I think Keelan Robinson, along with Rashawn Johnson, along with Bijan, makes for a really good top 3. On paper, Jordan Whittington, Xavier Worthy, and Joshua Moore, that's sexy as hell to me. But I say that while also acknowledging Xavier Worthy had a case of the dropsies in the very first scrimmage that he was in. Frankly, so did the other receivers. Right? We came out of that first scrimmage, and Herman, I do that once a show. Sarkisian, I got to stop with these Freudian slips.
You did it for 4 years, though. So to be fair.
Yes. Sarkisian made a point to say, not real happy with those guys after the first scrimmage. And I only bring it up because we know it's in them, right? If we go out on Saturday and we see some drops, nobody can say, nobody said anything in August about, no, we did. There was actually a lot of talk about drops and inconsistencies, and some days they were there and some days they weren't. But if you look at the tight end position, the wide receiver position, and the running back position, I think Card's got a lot of toys to play with. I think it would be really disappointing if Card doesn't play well. Because if he doesn't play well, it will open the door for Thompson to play in the game on Saturday. And then I think you potentially head, even in a win, I think you potentially head to Fayetteville with a quarterback controversy on your hands, when it didn't necessarily have to be that way. See, I'm with you, Anwar. I think Sarkisian weirdly has painted himself into a corner, because in order for it to completely work out for him, Card has to be great. Card's great. Thompson comes in, say, top of the second quarter, gets a series, and it doesn't even matter what he does, because Card is so good that when it's over with, nobody questions Card's talent or the fact that he's the best guy. Even if Casey Thompson gets a single drive and throws a touchdown pass, if it's over with and Hudson Card's just great, there's no questions. But what if it's not that? What if it's anything less than that? And what if the plan is to put Thompson into the game, no matter what's going on, first drive of the second quarter, that's your drive? Well, what if at the beginning of the second quarter, Texas is losing 10-7, and in the last Texas possession, Hudson Card had a few drops, 3 and out, Xavier Worthy drops a ball, Jordan drops a ball, everybody's, that rabble is happening in the stadium. And now in your next drive, you're bringing in the backup quarterback because you've told him that's when he's going to play. At that point, you could be 15 minutes into your season, and all of your planning may be for naught. Now, look, that may be dramatic, right? Like, it may not go down like that, but that it remains a possibility, that it is something that I think based on his comments on Monday, there's a camera fixated on Casey Thompson by the TV network all game long. And I think that, the subplot will be, if Texas throws a touchdown pass, does Casey Thompson come on the field and shake his hand? What if when Casey Thompson goes out, how does Hudson Card react to that? There's just a weird little subplot that I think they could have avoided. And it will be part of the story that gets told on Saturday. And it's a little bit of a dangerous game, just a small one.
I understand the reward of it, because you play them both. You see if maybe one is a quote unquote gamer. Okay. When he's in a game, we saw what Casey did in the Alamo Bowl. So you got a little bit of reason to believe maybe he's a gamer, better game player than a practice player. I used to always say that about Vince Young. We'd watch Vince at practice back when practices were open and he couldn't hit a 10-yard throw, but then he goes out in the games and he's near flawless, of course. But there is a lot of risk to playing both of them, in making that statement on Monday. Hey, we're going to play them both. you're opening yourself up, like you said, for a quarterback controversy that may last the rest of the year. So I understand the reward of possibly playing both and just see if you can, say it again, catch lightning in a bottle with one of these two guys. But there is a lot of risk that goes with the potential reward. I'm not sure I would take it. I'm not sure I wouldn't take, as you and Anwar have both suggested, the more traditional approach. Hudson's our starter. We're going to play him until the game's hopefully out of hand. And then Casey comes in and gets some work. And if Hudson has to play all 4 quarters, he has to play all 4 quarters. That to me, it's certainly a less risky way to handle the situation. But hey, Sark's the quarterback guru. That's why he makes the big bucks, man. So we'll see what he does with it. But I don't think, we've all heard, listen, I heard even last week somebody suggest to me it might be a rotation, series after series. And I don't think that's going to be the case at all. But I do think and Sark said it on Monday, he said, hey, there's no set plan. I don't think you can go into this game saying Casey Thompson's going to get this series. Casey Thompson's going to get the second quarter. He's going to get the third series. I think you have to play it by feel. And let's see how Hudson Card's doing in his first series or two. And then you make that decision. I mean, so, everything's up in the air. We're trying to predict the future, but I don't think I'd be surprised if there's any hard set plan that they're absolutely going to stick to without wavering from it. There has to be some wiggle room to whatever their plans are coming.
That plan has to be communicated to the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It may not be communicated to us, but you can't blindside Hudson Card at all. He's got to know this is coming at said time, and Casey's got to know certain thing is coming around a said time, but you can't blindside either one.
Yeah, you got to tell him, hey, Casey, we're going to give you the third drive, but hey, that is kind of dependent on how those first 2 drives go. I mean, they have to be understanding too that there are a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah, I just to say he don't have to tell us that, but he's got to tell them, and because if not, that's how you create chaos in your room.
Real quick, before we go to parting shots, last question I wanted to ask, and Jason, I'll go to you first. So be ready, Anwar. You're getting the first parting shot.
Let me tap in.
Anwar gets the first parting shot. You go first on this question. When Sark talks about scripting his plays, Anwar and I talked about this the other day. Alex made a really good point in that the scripted plays ought to give us an idea of who Texas values on offense and how they try to get them the ball in the first, let's say, 15 plays of the game. That not only do you want to get the ball to your best players, but in an ideal world, you're calling a play that we used to say this, like, God, they got to try to get Brennan Eagles in the game, or they got to try to do this. And there's a way to do that takes advantage of what they do best. So what's the first 15 plays look like to you? Like, who do you think early in the game they're making a point to try to get involved?
I thought that was really interesting in that what Sark said is that, hey, normally when I think of scripted plays, I'm thinking the guy's doing that to kind of feel out the defense and see how they're going to react to this and adjust to that. He said, no, sometimes it's about getting your playmakers involved and getting them into the flow of the game and probably keeping them happy to some degree. So I thought that was a really interesting answer by Sark. And again, scripted plays, I'm all for it, but I think you can go off script. Obviously, if you got a run up the middle and it's 3rd and 8, you're probably going to go off that script. But you're going to have some scripted for Bijan, but do you really need to script for Bijan? Probably not. When I think of scripted plays, I'm thinking more in the passing game. Maybe for Bijan, you're scripting, okay, we're going to try this run versus this other run to the outside and see which one is blocked better and see which one maybe Bijan has a better feel for and is more comfortable with. But, I think you're going to want to get Xavier Worthy involved early, Whittington. Joshua Moore, maybe, but, Josh has got experience. I think, I could see them scripting plays to the tight ends. But to me, it'd be more probably about Xavier Worthy. And I think getting the ball in Whittington's hands a couple times in those first 15 games. And obviously, you're looking at the quarterback in those too. But I think those would be a couple guys I could certainly see them force feeding the ball to with scripted plays. Your true freshman receiver, Jordan Whittington, a guy who's we know is immensely talented but has missed a lot of time. Let's get him involved. Let's kind of see what he can do, and then maybe get the tight ends involved just to kind of see how the defense reacts, see if that opens things up for the outside receivers for the run game. So, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting answer by Sark about, yes, he's going to script and the reasons he's going to script. And if we're talking about, okay, I'm not just scripting schematically. I'm scripting because I want to get the ball in a couple of my guys' hands, see what they can do with it. Well, who better than Whittington and Xavier Worthy?
Anwar, it sounds like Jason just described socialism. Like everybody's going to get a snap. Everybody's going to get at least one ball, the tight ends, all the receivers, Bijan inside, outside. Do you think it's any more specific? Like, right. Like I hear what Jason's saying, and he's complete balance. Tight ends, wide receivers, throwing the ball out of the backfield to the running backs, like mixing it up. But then there's also something to be said for, all right, well, in our first 15 plays, Bijan's getting it 8 times, and that leaves 7 snaps. So, 2 of those, you know what I mean? Suddenly it starts to thin out a lot. Where do you think that first 15 goes? Do you think it's as spread out and, I guess, diverse in terms of the ball allotment and where it's going, or do you think it's going to be more narrowed down to just a few guys?
Yeah, to me, just a few guys. Bijan being the main guy is the one I would probably place my money on. You get gamble for young quarterback. You don't want his first start. I don't know if you want to ask him to do too many things just to start off the game. So he loves Bijan, and that's his dude. So I expect to see a lot of 12 personnel and them operating, what they can do out of there. Those are the things I expect to see going forward. He loves Cade Brewer. Texas fans are like, what? I mean, where's Jared Wiley? I mean, I don't know how many more years we'll have to ask the question. But Cade Brewer just doesn't give a damn. Like, Cade Brewer hears everybody Cade Brewer hears Jared Wiley and Gunnar Helm and Jatavian Sanders, and I don't know what it is, but Cade Brewer don't give a damn. And he ain't giving up his position for nobody. So, he seems to do well in that position. So I think we'll see a little bit of 12 personnel, Cade Brewer, a little Bijan. And then the thing that Sarkisian has always promised has been shots. So I think within there, I think it's Bijan, Cade Brewer, and then the deep shot. And that's where, Xavier Worthy's got to do what he can do, or Jordan Whittington. But what has he said, Catch? He doesn't like long drives. He's let that be known that he's not a guy that wants a 12-play, 14-play drive. So we know that going in. I mean, he's going to get Bijan, but we'll probably see shots sooner than later.
You just made me even more fascinated for Saturday and kind of how aggressive they go, and whether or not they go conservative or they just flipping it out to Brewer in the flat to build up some confidence. And, there's those, hey, he completed a pass throw, which is just a little button hook. And it's like, all right, our quarterback's 1 for 1. Let's play ball.
Double pass to the running back. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how long it takes before we see that first real throw down the field. I think it'll tell a story about this Texas offense that'll probably exist all the way through that game and into the future games. Let's do parting shots. All right, Anwar, I said it. You're first.
All right, so I got 2 parting shots. It gave me time to prepare. One, looking forward to being in a full stadium, which I hadn't had that opportunity in a while. I mean, like last year, it was so fascinating where you're playing into, a quarter, stadiums, like a quarter full, and that could be smaller depending on what places that you went to. I remember going to a lot of the airports, having to travel for games and just being a ghost town at the Austin airport, just sitting there by myself. And it was just crazy. It was like eerie at times, going into press boxes and going to stadiums and no one being around. So for the war room, I was able to catch up with Chris Delcani and just get a rundown of all the things that they're planning to do on Saturday. So it's going to be fascinating to see all these things. A Ferris wheel, which apparently the Ferris wheel that got stuck on UT is not going to be the Ferris wheel that they're using on Saturday, but there will be a Ferris wheel for some odd reason to add to the flair. It's funny. I was talking to someone asked me about, they're like, the Ferris wheel. And it's like, if Texas was winning on a consistent basis, would there be a Ferris wheel? I was like, I don't know. Does Bama have a Ferris wheel outside their stadium? I mean, does Clemson have a Ferris wheel outside their stadium? So no, until Texas gets to the point, there'll be a little, show and dance until you can just rely on the product. And the other thing I'll say for those who are new to the channel and unfamiliar with the things that Ketch and I and Jason and all of us do, but Ketch and I in particularly started our post-game show many years ago. And so if you're enjoying this content and you've made it this long, hang out, because we'll do a post-game show that'll be live, that'll be here on YouTube, that allows fan interaction. So like Ketch said, we've done it for, what was it, 6-7 years, Ketch, at least?
This will be year number 7.
Year number 7, so it'll be even better than before. Logan Law Firm is going to be one of our sponsor, so make sure you check that out. The post game show, it is going to be different. It's going to start right away, and I'll let Ketch tell a little bit more, but it'll start right away. I'll join that eventually, but make sure you hang out. If you like this content, Saturday we will be live for you to go ahead and interact with us.
Mr. Suchomel, batter up.
Yeah, I'll keep it short, but we haven't touched on recruiting. It's been a very active week for Texas. Since we recorded last episode, 3 new commitments. 3 defensive line commitments, in fact. Aaron Bryant, defensive lineman out of Mississippi. Dre Bledsoe, defensive lineman out of Marlin, Texas. And Jamon Tapp, defensive lineman out of Louisiana. So it's been a productive week for Bo Davis, for the Texas defense in terms of recruiting. One Rivals 100 member in Bledsoe, and a guy who's just out of the Rivals 100 in Jamon Tapp, that Texas kind of snuck in and swooped away from LSU. So I'll have updates in the War Room tonight, kind of a little tease. I did talk to Bledsoe and Tapp, the 2 most recent commitments. Really good players, but Texas is going to have to work and fight to hold on to those commitments. It's great to get the commitment. Now, I've always been told by one college coach told me this in particular. He said, when you take an out-of-state commitment, you have to recruit him as if he's an uncommitted player until he signs his letter of intent. And that's certainly going to be the case with Jamon Tapp. I don't think as much with Aaron Bryant, the defensive lineman out of Mississippi. He seems pretty locked in. But in talking Jamon Tapp to Jamon Tapp shortly after he committed on Monday night, in fact, when I called Jamon right after he announced his commitment, and he texted me. He said, "Hey, I'm on the phone. I can't talk. I'll call you back." And when he called me back, he said, "Oh, sorry, I was on the phone with LSU." So literally, right when he was done making his commitment to Texas, he had about a 30-minute conversation with LSU. So that tells you what kind of player he is. Also tells you what kind of battle Texas is going to have to hang on to his commitment. So productive week for Texas with 3 commitments. They'll have some recruits on campus this weekend for the game. A lot of committed guys. 5-star offensive lineman Cam Dewberry will be on campus for the game this weekend. Former Texas commit Jalen Gilbo, the cornerback, will be in for the game. So there'll be some guys we'll watch closely for the game this weekend. Football's hitting the home stretch, so to speak, or hitting the beginning stretch, I guess. But recruiting is also heating up with these games starting up. So Texas will have some players on campus on Saturday. We'll have coverage of that over the weekend.
My parting shot, pretty simple. I'll follow up on Anwar's toes and just let everybody know, pregame, postgame show for Saturday. We're going to be doing a live pregame show about 30 minutes out from the opener. We'll set the stage in terms of any notes that come in on the pregame. If there's any last-minute injuries or anything like that, I'll be live by myself on Saturday, just holding down the fort, just to whet your appetite before we go into the game. And then on Saturday, once the game is over, Serenity Douglas and myself will start the pregame show. We've got a brand new format that will allow us, I think, to be a lot more interactive and take questions. And then Anwar will jump in. Who knows? Maybe even Suchomel if he's not too busy. You never know what a Saturday night after the opener looks like. Suchomel might be like, "Bring me on. I'm having a beer. Let's have a good time." Or
maybe monitoring a message board meltdown. So
they might be saying, "I'm way too busy."
I need more beer.
Exactly. So kind of depending on how the mood goes, we could have an entire cast and crew drop by. But we want to elevate what we're doing in the post-game show and bring it to you earlier and not even wait until after the coaches are done with their pros conference. So a little bit of a different change. Hopefully you guys will be with us. We plan on having a good time. For myself, for Jason Suchomel, and for Anwar Richardson and the rest of the Orangebloods gang, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe. We appreciate your comments as well. We'll talk to you soon. Later.